on this journey. So, and thanks for hanging in there. I know we originally scheduled this webinar for sometime in August, and thing after thing hit, and so we had to delay. So we're really thrilled that this can finally happen. And our co-conspirator, Carolina Pavard-Graham, who's our conference coordinator on the Allies for Racial Equity Steering Committee, is over in another room. She's in the sanctuary here at Mount Diablo, continuing a conversation about disrupting white supremacy culture. If you recall, that was our earlier webinar, and there are folks who still want to talk about that. So, but she sends her regards. Since it's been so long since we announced this webinar until we actually had it, I'm hoping that gave you plenty of time to take a look at the platform and to become a little bit familiar with it. Thank you, Lauren. And so I'm just going to briefly go over it in case you haven't. Our purpose here tonight is not to review and digest and analyze the platform, right? It's just to become familiar enough with it to be used as a tool to engage white anti-racists in our work, okay? So that is the real purpose of this webinar. So first, the platform was derived, well, first I'm gonna talk about the difference between Black Lives Matter and the Movement for Black Lives, right? So Black Lives Matter became a hashtag and a sort of slogan that came about after the murder of Trayvon Martin, right? The Movement for Black Lives is sort of the latest iteration of the liberation for Black people in this country, right? And it's a coalition of many different groups who came together to put this platform together. So that's that in a nutshell. So the demands of the platform are, first, end the war on Black people. We know that there's an anti-Blackness in this country that's baked into this country's foundation by privileging whiteness and white superiority and white supremacy, which puts anti-Blackness at the bottom of any hierarchy, right? Second demand is reparations. Oh, she did put it up. Thank you. Is reparations. Okay. So reparations for past and continuing harms to Black people. The government, corporations, and other institutions have profited off the backs of Black people, continuing to this day. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to watch 13th yet. Anna DeBray's movie that's on Netflix. It shows that we've come full circle to enslaving Black people under the guise of mass incarceration and prison labor that a multitude of corporations, way more than I was even aware, are using that prison labor. So reparations for past and current inequities. I got to toggle back and forth here, so. Invest and divest, so invest in communities of color in terms of infrastructure and education at the federal, state, and local level, for retroactive, using the retroactive decriminalization and immediate release and expungement of all drug-related offenses, equitable and universal health care, fully funded education, a divestment from industrial multinational use of fossil fuels, and a cut in military expenditures. So moving the budget from weapons of oppression to investing in people's future. Economic justice, again, we need a progressive restructuring of the tax codes to ensure that there is a radical, sustainable redistribution of wealth, since wealth is earned off the backs of working people, particularly people of color. federal and state job programs, a right to restore land, clean air, clean water, and housing, and an end to the exploitative privatization of natural resources, such as we're seeing right now at Standing Rock, a right to for workers to organize, financial support of Black alternative institutions, and protections for workers. Community control. So that includes the democratic community control of local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, an end to the privatization of education, participatory budgeting at the local, state, and federal levels. And then political power. So an end to the criminalization of Black political activity, right, targeted at organizers. The end of money controlling politics, campaign finance reform. Full access, guarantees, and protections of the right to vote for all people. So stopping disenfranchisement of the vote. Full access to technology, and protection and increased funding for Black institutions. So that's a very quick overview of the platform. And as I said, our purpose is not to review it and analyze it and in any way, but to become familiar with it and the demands that the Movement for Black Lives is asking as a way to engage our white folks in doing racial justice, okay? And so, on the wrong page? And so in that way, so for starters, right, we have to get familiar with it. Again, and that's why we've had it posted on our Facebook page and on our website, so that there's a lot in there. You know, I just very quickly went over the top things, and so to become familiar with it, and to really understand what our folks of color, to whom we are accountable, are asking for, right? We can't be good allies unless we understand what the ask is. Okay? And really, the way to understand this platform is that it is really a policy and a cultural shift. It's no less than that, okay? It's not like politics as usual at all. We're talking about a restructuring of our culture and our institutions. And so that's a lot. And, you know, and it's not about having to agree with every point of the platform. As I mentioned, this platform was put together by a group of a coalition of many different groups. And so it's not about agreeing, you know, with the platform, but it's about supporting people of color in their movement for their own liberation, okay? And so our job really is to build support in our white communities, particularly in our predominantly white UU congregations, for this vision. And for other marginalized folks that we find in our communities, our neighborhoods, our places of work, our schools. And to remember too that the intersectional piece of this whole thing, one of the things I love best about the Movement for Black Lives is that they say we are leaving no one behind, right? Because as we know, you know, when Black, queer, disabled, trans folks' lives matter, then we know all lives will matter, right? And it's also about supporting the leadership of Black folks, okay? And we're not looking for perfect people to do this. You don't have to be the perfect ally before you start this work. Just want to point that out. But this is part of the preparation of people for being able to embrace through action these principles and through relationships, right? Moving towards action. And so one of the things you can look for is, as you're looking over the platform, you know, what comes to mind in terms of your particular local issues? You know, if you know that you've got schools that are underfunded and students that are being, you know, expelled at a high rate, or students where, you know, there's a high rate of non-passing students, or a low graduation rate. You know, some of those issues are directly related to the platform, and that's where you can locate some of your work. And of course, the goal in all of this is to end white supremacy, right, folks? We learn about white supremacy. Yeah, okay, say it with me. End white supremacy. There we go. I guess that's all I have around. I'm going to take a pause here and look to my co-facilitators to see if you have anything else to add or anything else to lift up.
Well, I'd love to lift up sort of looking at this, and for those of you who were able to make our last webinar where we talked about the sort of systems that hold up white supremacy in an organization, and everybody in the room, we've been talking about this all day, and this feels to me like a really great example of doing these things. One of the big things that is called, there are a lot of them I think that this touching on, but the reading this platform and trusting that this is the platform that we should follow, and that we don't actually have a better platform, is something that I know I need to work on, and I think that a lot of us in this movement, and especially sort of white people who have been acculturated and taught that, like, well, maybe, did you really want to include that in your platform? Maybe it wasn't a smart strategic move to include that in your platform, or looking at that. And so this is a really great opportunity for us to practice the things that we're working on, of let's sit with this, let's listen to this, let's listen to our allies, let's listen to the community that's asking for our help in a very clear, like, thank you for doing this, and writing it out for us in a way that is very clear. And instead of critiquing the ask, let's look at how we can live into the ask and honor that. And so let's not look at the paternalism where really we know what's best and what does that mean, or the needing to be comfortable and like, but that feels weird for me to do that, or what's the solution to that, and all of those things that we are acculturated, we are trained to do. That is what we have been taught. As a country, everybody has been taught this. So white supremacy has been taught to everyone. So a person of color could very easily say, no, all of these things are also correct. Like, yes, the things you're saying are right, because we've all been acculturated into this. And so I really am excited and want to honor and give us the opportunity to live into, like, those of us in the room who've been doing this work today, to really live into what we've been talking about, and those of us joining from afar to really sort of be willing to lean into what does it mean to be a real ally, and if not an ally, an accomplice. Like, let's really step up what we are doing and who we are and how we are living this, and how do we live into really dismantling the white supremacy. So I want to hold that up as we are looking at this with that framing.
Right. You pointed up a really interesting, framing of this, that, we've been talking about white supremacy culture all afternoon, and that really this is a detailed gift for us to a list of ways to go about dismantling white supremacy culture. That is what all that is about, right?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, very eloquent. That's sort of exactly what I was thinking. So you saved me a lot of time. The other thing I would just underline is something Carrie already said, but I think it's so important, and in fact, exactly what I was doing as you were reading through this, is think about, where am I seeing this happen in my own home community? Because as Carrie read through this, every single one of them, I was like, oh my God, Austin does that. Oh my God, this happens in Austin. And we're thought of as one of the most progressive cities in the country, but I can point to these things, every single one of them happening in my own home community.
So speak up.
Okay, not loud enough?
You need to keep your voice faced forward instead of talking to your neighbors.
Okay, so I was just saying, I was underlining what Carrie mentioned, is to think about where these things are happening in your own home community, because as she went through each of them, I was thinking about Austin, Texas, which is supposedly one of the most progressive cities in the country and thinking every single one of these things are going on in that supposedly progressive city.
Can anyone else relate to that? Anybody in the room? Anybody out there? Does anything come to mind that you can work on in your community? Lori?
I'm definitely interested in hearing about how we do this work and about what accountability means in this work.
Right. So we can't do this work alone, right? We kind of have to do at least two things at once. One, we have to organize white people to be engaged in this work and understanding that, you know, we have a list of demands. I want to say a roadmap, but I don't want to say a roadmap. These are things we can work on, I guess is a better way to say it, in ending white supremacy. And so we want to organize white people to do that. And we want to build accountable relationships with people of color organizations who are engaging and moving this platform forward. Because we know that for folks who are marginalized and oppressed, that they know the best way towards their own liberation, right? And we also know that their liberation, that our liberation is wrapped up in theirs, right? Did that answer the question? Thank you, thank you.
And so I think because the goal of this webinar isn't just to listen to us very wise people talk, but the goal is to really engage. With that, I'd love to sort of put forth the question of where in your life have you encountered one of these points of the platform? So where in your life, sorry, thank you that you have it handy. Yeah. So where in your life have you encountered a successful working towards this, or an opportunity that you're seeing now to work towards ending the war on Black people, or reparations, or investment and divestment, or economic justice, or community control, or political power? So where in your life have you seen this succeed or fail, or you see an opportunity for it to be tried?
Anybody think of an example? We mentioned what's going on at Standing Rock right now. There's an example of people in the community taking some power and taking control over their own local community and their own lives. So are there situations where you can see that happening anywhere?
That's to the room as well.
Yeah,
that's right.
Is anybody involved with issues of mass incarceration, or?
She's sharing the platform.
Just again. Okay. Or prison justice, and when prisoners are released, is anybody working on those issues?
Over here in this room, we have someone who's interested here to say a little word.
One example that I've experienced with the INVEST of something that wasn't working, just an illumination of how the school systems work in some areas of the country. Back when I was in Missouri, I was a teacher in an impoverished school, and mostly students were people of color. And a lot of the issues around public school funding were that the funding was based on the tax dollars of the local area, property taxes. And so, and the most recent business that had been built in the area was a Burger King 5 years before, with the exception of some large businesses that were given tax exemptions. And so the school district struggled and continued to struggle because they didn't have the funding. It's one of the reasons that investment is so essential into education in new and different ways.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, in Texas, we have an interesting school funding formula. It's based on property taxes, and in an effort to make it more equitable, They do take monies from property taxes from property wealthy districts and redistribute it into property poorer districts in an effort to equalize school funding. But the formula is not equitable. Nobody is happy with it. In fact, the Supreme Court of Texas said, okay, the whole thing has to be fixed, but found that it was still fair and adequate, which is always what we say to our students. We really just want you to be adequate in school. So, and what we know is that so much is tied together, right? In property poor districts tend to be, low socioeconomic folks, communities of color, where the needs are much higher. So it's like that. Has everybody seen that cartoon of the people looking over the fence and the boxes underneath and what's equality and what's equity and what's liberation? The same dollars that are spent on my kids who get breakfast, who, their parents buy them computers, they have tutors if they need them, they have extracurricular activities, they have, a jacket in the winter, even Texas. Versus schools that, these wraparound schools that have to provide all the services, not just education, but, food and clothing and sometimes healthcare and, remediation. So school funding is definitely an area that, that would be right up our alley, I would think, for local congregations to get involved. Anybody else have any ideas? Yeah, there's Lori again.
Hi, I would like to talk just briefly about the Church of the Larger Fellowship's prison ministry work. We have had an explosion of the number of incarcerated members over the last several years, 5 to 7 years. We are up to 730 some odd members incarcerated, Unitarian Universalists who are incarcerated. And many of them found Unitarian Universalism through word of mouth, through our prison ministry and through people who had already found us. And when I saw that mapped for the first time, there was a dot in every state in the union except for like 3. And in many of states, there were like 30 or 40 dots of people incarcerated, Church of the Larger Fellowship, Unitarian Universalists. And we are a minority within a minority within a minority in that population. So I was completely overwhelmed when I saw it. And I just want to say that I watched 13th, the Ava DuVernay documentary that's currently available on Netflix. It's called 13th. It's about the 13th Amendment, and it does make some reference to what Carrie's talking about, quite a bit of reference about the continuation of slavery by another name through, the slave patrols, through Jim Crow South segregation, and into mass incarceration and privatization of the prison industry in perpetuity right now. So that really fits across that INVEST-DIVEST section about building political power, because so many people are disenfranchised and economic power. And in Ferguson, they noticed that there were 3 outstanding warrants per household on average in that area. So that's how over-policed that area was at the time that Michael Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson. So I think we need to be really cognizant of the disparities and just the disproportionate and what's behind that and who's benefiting from that system and who's being completely destroyed by that system.
Hey, Lori, it's Charles. You want to just say a couple things about people's opportunity to connect with prisoners through the CLF?
Yes, I'd love that, Charles.
No, I was going to have you do it. I'm off camera.
Okay, say it again so I know what I'm saying.
He'd like you to do it. He's off camera.
Yeah, say again what he asked for.
So how people can engage with the CLF prison ministry?
Oh, thank you very much. We have, just go to the website, go to clfuu.org. There will be a link for the prison ministry, very easy to find. And you can find a lot more information there. Or you can find it on Facebook.
What kinds of things can people do? What's the mission?
The core thing an individual can do right now, and we're still kind of in a social services mode. We talked about this here at the ARE conference, that there's social services where you're doing it at people and for people. And we are in the move of transformative justice right now. But right now, the core thing we're doing is a letter writing ministry with members. So once they become members, they go through the new UU class. We pair up people with letter writing ministry, and it's incredibly powerful ministry to do. And you're mentored with that, and you're never connected directly to them. They don't have your last name, you don't have their last name, and everything goes through our headquarters. So this is a handwritten letter ministry, and you're guided and mentored through the whole thing. So we are setting up a website at worthynow, worthynow.org. And that's one way to get connected if mass incarceration and privatization and kind of what's happening to these families and these individuals is pulling on your heartstrings.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. I loved a lot of what you had to say, and I want to also just mention what a lot of people I know, but there is a parallel for-profit detention system that's been set up for immigrants in this country. And so when I was talking about seeing all of this stuff in Austin being a progressive city, I didn't mean we're doing the stuff in the platform. I mean, we're doing the things that are causing the need for the platform. And so this platform will have intersectionality in good ways, in the way that the oppressions have intersectionality, right? If these things get passed, it's going to benefit far more people than the movement for Black Lives.
So I'd be curious. I think that was really helpful, and Charles, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think in our congregation, part of what we're struggling with is this platform is great, and oh my God, what do we do? How do we get involved? And I've read it multiple times, and I'm curious if there are other things like this, other ways we can kind of help each other figure out what to do, how we get involved.
So again, I would say, start with getting to know the platform as a group, right, and understanding it, and then look for local groups who are working the platform, and look for the issues that are raised in the platform. The more you get to know what's in there and what's being asked, and you look around your community, the more you might see, oh, this is what they're talking about. Whether it's education, whether it's prison, whether it's economic opportunity.
So I know our local Black Lives Matter group. You're saying though that that's only a hashtag for the movement for Black Lives. So how is that? Are those groups somehow connected? Are they disconnected? I'll go and talk to them about it, but I'm just curious about it.
So the movement for Black Lives, or the Black Lives Matter movement, sort of synonymous term, is a coalition of a lot of groups, and they go by a lot of different names depending on where they are. In Dallas, the Black Lives Matter group is called Dallas Action. Okay, and so what their 3 priorities are with the police department. Okay, in ending the 72-hour rule. So that's when police officers are protected for 72 hours after they're involved in an officer shooting. They don't have to report. We have Dallas does not have an online complaint system. So if you have a complaint against the Dallas Police Department, you have to go down to the Dallas Police Department to lodge the complaint. So to getting an online complaint system. And the third one is, ironically, and there are lots of things ironic in Dallas, as you can imagine, with what happened July 7th with the shooting of the 5 Dallas police officers and Chief Brown and how he handled that. But and Dallas also has the strongest citizens review board anywhere in the country because they have subpoena power. Most citizens review board do not have that. However, in order to get a subpoena, you have to go through the police department's internal affairs office. So a subpoena has actually never been issued from the citizens review board. Oh, and going back to Chief Brown in Dallas over the summer, and the complaint department, so when he says there are only 9 complaints against Dallas police officers, you know, if you look behind that and understand what's going on systemically, that traumatized people have to go back into, you know, where they were traumatized. Yeah, so if you traumatize them, you can understand why that piece is linked there.
Hey, Carrie, this is Lori. I also put a link in the chat to the About page where you see the list of over 50 organizations that are members of the United Front that help put together this policy platform for the Movement for Black Lives. And within that United Front, the Black Lives Matter Network is a member. Now, that doesn't mean that every Black Lives Matter chapter or people who use the word Black Lives Matter in their name have signed on to this platform because they are a decentralized movement.
And just to say that UU Allies for Racial Equity has endorsed the platform. So, yeah. And there was something else. So in Dallas, you know, for example, so Dallas actually, we have partnered with their group as accountability partners. And they, the leaders of Dallas Action have come and talked to our White Allies group. And they have asked us for very specific things. They were having a meeting with one of the city council members. So they asked, okay, everybody in Dallas who lives in City Council District 2, can you please come to this meeting with the city council member? Another accountability partner that we have in Dallas is, and it's a nationwide organization that was founded in Dallas called Mothers Against Police Brutality. Colette Flanagan's son was killed by Dallas police about 9 years ago, and she founded this, and she has asked us to do a letter writing campaign, again, on those same 3 points. Actually, she's put together a 9-point platform for police reform. I don't have anything. But so they've asked, because then she came and spoke to us and she said, listen, when white people write and ask for these things, the city council is going to listen. Yeah.
Can you hear me? I'd like to add in the Berkeley Unitarian Church. We walk every Friday night with different congregations in Richmond, California, to advocate for reduction in gun violence. And many times we are in neighborhoods where there literally was a shooting or more than one shooting during the past couple of weeks. So each Friday night we start from a different church. And we walk for 1 hour in that neighborhood, and usually the neighborhood walks with us as well. And actually we are trying to expand that in the community of each neighborhood more involved. And I'm not saying we use it. We have a host congregation. So we're working with them to expand that. And I know that they have sidewalks in Oakland as well. You can get inside. And so that says,
about that?
Hello, if you're just joining us from the Samsung Galaxy 7.
Uh-oh. Get the fire extinguisher.
No, it's only the note that's a problem.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Phew. So great example. Thanks. What else? How about anybody out? in Redland. Any examples for what you're doing with your congregation or in your community? Oh, okay, we got something in the chat. How are you talking to your members of the about policy regarding Israel and Palestine? Anybody talking about Israel and Palestine in their congregation? Hi, Catherine.
Hi. Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Our congregation in Westport, Connecticut has put up a Black Lives banner just a couple of weeks ago. So we're waiting to see if there's any reaction in town. It's been in the local press, but no conversations that I've seen yet about it.
Okay, great. Are you doing any organizing around that?
Not at the moment,
Okay.
but we will be. We have, what our congregation has done is joined the Interfaith Council of the city that's near us, Bridgeport, Connecticut, which has a mix of black and white churches. A lot of black churches are members of that are in Bridgeport. Westport itself does not have any black churches or even very many black people.
Great, so that could potentially be, you know, a connection to build relationships.
Definitely, that's why we've done it. Yeah.
That's awesome. So if any of those congregations are doing any racial justice work, you know, that would be a great relationship to develop. Good work. Anybody else doing any interfaith work like that?
Hello?
I can.
Hi. So we're on Long Island, and we did have a banner up over the summer. Then it was 3 times it was defaced. And it's currently down because of a number of reasons, some involving potential lawsuits, and it's pretty complex. But in early November, we have a march, and it's a coalition of groups with a local university, of AME Church, several other places of faith joining together, an organization called Building Bridges, which has a lot of potential. So we have this march coming, and I think what we need to do is have a next step. We're pretty new in this work, and I'd be interested in your responses to what a next step would be. And we are, I don't know if you had gotten a text, we are getting some resistance from our Jewish members of the UU who find it hard to support the Palestinian-Israeli issue. And I understand what you're saying about you don't have to understand or buy into the whole platform, but we are meeting resistance with that. So I appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, that's a difficult issue. I know I struggle with that as well.
Woman with her husband walking in the background. Over there, he looks like he's doing the dishes.
Oh, that's my husband. Charlie, they see you.
Their husband's popping in all over the place.
Yes.
So let me go to the first question first. So next step. So what's the purpose of the walk?
I just think unity. It's a support of Black Lives Matter.
Oh, okay.
Is
great.
The reason. Mm-hmm.
Great. So are the organizers of that, what else are they working on?
So as I said, that we're really new to doing this work. So this is almost like our first step. It's almost like a rallying event. And we do need a next step. So I'm wondering if the next step is, as you suggested earlier, to just get people together and read through the platform together. Is that what you did? Read through it together, or do they do that work individually and then dissect it at some point?
Yeah. So I haven't been involved in any groups that have, read it together or are working on it together as a whole piece, just working on different aspects of it. Mm-hmm. It's more been individual work, in my experience. But definitely I would, a great next step would be to call a mass meeting of folks and just get them together to do some relationship building. You know, it could be a potluck, you know, over dinner or something, and get some very simple agreements about kind of the goals that you have in the community and how you want to be together, you know, and that you're going to commit to building this relationship and have a second meeting.
Yes, I like your idea about looking locally and finding a need that fits with one or part of the platform. I mean, that just makes a lot of sense. But then, like, have you found that the leaders just emerge from a situation where you bring everyone together?
I think if you are involved with a multi-group event like that, and then you have a meeting following and you ask the group, okay, what are the needs in the community? I think you will get plenty of responses out of that. And then you can find out where the energy is. If there's a group that's interested in education, you can get that working group together. If you have a group that's interested in doing prison ministry or working on mass incarceration or wrongful conviction, you can get a group together working with that. If you have a group that really like the walk and would rather work on actions, you know, you can get a group together working on that. So that's a great way to build capacity in an organization that you want to keep going.
Okay, that sounds great. Those are good tips. Thanks.
Good. Welcome.
Hey guys, Dana has got her hand up in the Zoom application, so I'm going to call on her next if that's okay.
Hi everybody, this is Dana from Houston. I'm sorry I'm in the dark. We're driving on our way to an engagement party. But I just wanted to say I'm part of the First UU Houston Church, and it kind of seemed like crickets in my multi-site congregation around the Black Lives Matter issue. So I mentioned something to our campus minister. We have 3 sites for our church, and he took the initiative to invite Carlton Elliott Smith to come and do a workshop at our congregation. So First UU Houston, I guess we have maybe about 400 members altogether. And our campus has about maybe 50, so we're kind of a small church in a rented strip center. And Carlton came and did an absolutely amazing job of presenting the case for supporting Black Lives Matter. And I want to say we had about 20 people there, 20 to 25, from all 3 congregations and a few other churches in the Houston area. We have about 5 or 6 in the greater Houston area. So the next step for our congregation, I think, is going to be to have a discussion as to, do we want to put a Black Lives Matter sign in our lobby, and then try that out for a while and see if we then want to take a step of putting a sign outside our facility. I think some people are a little concerned because we don't own our space, we're renting it. And one of the people said that we have 2 other churches in this strip center. Maybe we should go talk to them about, would they also like to put out a sign at the same time? That was a suggestion actually from one of our Black Lives of UU members in our congregation. So we'll probably continue that discussion, and I just feel encouraged that something happened and we're talking about it. And if anybody has any input, that would be great. Also, I'm married to a Palestinian, so I've seen a lot of discussion about the Israel-Palestine part of the vision, and I understand that is a difficult issue for a lot of people, especially people of Jewish heritage. So I just want to say, thinking of everybody, looking for common ground.
Thanks, Ken. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Carrie. Do you want to tell people who Carlton Elliott Smith is?
Oh, sorry. Yes, he is Southern Region UUA staff, and he's also a member of the Black Lives of UU Organizing Collective. So sort of very convenient, because it's his job to travel around and talk to congregations about what they need help with. And he's also on the Black Lives of UU Organizing Collective. And so I felt like we were very fortunate to have him as a resource.
Thanks. And then, I was going to ask you, do you have any tips for the question about talking about Palestine and Israel?
Well, yeah, I'm on the board of Youth for Justice in the Middle East, and I would say I think a lot of people are not maybe very aware of what happened in 1948. And yes, there were violent acts against Jewish people in the Palestine area leading up to that, which were very tragic. But there were a number of massacres in Palestinian villages, and that would probably technically fall under the category of genocide. So, and I think in terms of what I've read about the history of how a lot of people in the Black community feel about what has happened to them, that definitely qualifies as genocide. The lynching campaigns that have happened and what's happening in the streets today touches upon a concept of genocide. So I would just say, I would encourage people to read more about something called the Nakba, N-A-K-B-A, which is what the Palestinians call what happened to them in 1948, where about 75 to 80% of the Palestinian Arabs became homeless within the space of a few months. And I think today many Palestinians feel that there's sort of a slow pre-genocide or genocidal type of activity that goes on. There's definitely a lot of anti-Palestinian sentiment on the part of the military people that carry out the occupation. And, if one looks at what happened in Gaza in 2014, where 2,200 people who were Palestinian were killed by bombing, and about 500 of them were children. So that's a very big nutshell, but I think reading is important, and having the grace to have respectful conversations with each other and realize that everybody is somewhere on a spectrum of understanding and opinion, and we should all just respect where each other comes from and not be judgmental.
Thanks, Nigama.
And I'd like to hold up what the platform actually says about Israel and Palestine.
Nice. And the Nakba means the disaster, right?
It means the catastrophe or the disaster, yes. And actually, Voice for Peace has a curriculum on their website now. And it's very interesting. It's called Facing the Nakba, and it has a lot of historical documents and resources. So that might be a somewhat comfortable place for some people to find more information.
Thank you.
Sure.
And so I just speak, as we're sort of talking around, Israel, Palestine, I want to actually name what it says in the platform around Israel and Palestine, and not just say Israel and Palestine. So it says under the investment divestment, if you go to that tab and then go to a cut in U.S. military expenditures and a reallocation of those funds to invest in domestic infrastructure and community well-being, one of the bullet points under that. So Israel and Palestine is not a huge part of the platform, but it is a part of the platform that is important. It says approximately $3 billion in U.S. aid is allocated to Israel, a state that practices systemic discrimination and has maintained a military occupation of Palestine for decades. Together with aid to Egypt, Israel's most important regional ally, this figure represents nearly 75% of all U.S. aid dollars. As these figures demonstrate, resources and funds needed for reparations and for building a just and equitable society domestically are instead used to wage war against a majority of the world's community. So the challenge is to start defunding, and later, and I apologize, but it's multiple bullet points. So later in the what to do, it says specifically to defund the military-industrial context, the military-industrial complex of Israel, and the argument that divestment is anti-Semitic is similar to saying that you don't agree with the military-industrial complex in the United States makes you anti-American. It's not a statement about religion, and it is not a statement about a people in entirety. It's a statement about the militarization that exists that happens to oppress people who don't have the opportunity to defend themselves, and then are villainized and presented as dangerous others against our allies. So the challenge is to stop funneling our money into our military and into that military with the purpose of oppressing other people, and start looking at how to sort of live more justly in the world. So it is not anti-Semitic, and there are abundant Jewish Voices for Peace organizations that will help that conversation if that is something that you are struggling with.
And thank you, Lauren. Our next guest wants to speak, Claire.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple of things. One is I'm also a member of a Renewal Jewish synagogue, and all three rabbis of that synagogue signed on to the Black Lives Matter platform, as did the cantor and I think and other religious leaders. So what that congregation did is have a teach-in, and so they asked the members to read the platform ahead of time and set aside from 3:30 to 7 on a Sunday afternoon, and got together and divided up into groups where we looked at the different sections and then spoke to them, spoke about them. And then this was, and I didn't stay for the whole thing. I didn't stay for the part, because first it was the learning part, and then after that was more questioning and questions and discussion. And this is in preparation for the board because I think what the rabbis the religious leaders want is for the congregation, the whole congregation, to sign on to this platform. So one of the issues, there's a 13.1, and there's also another section that talks about, that got a lot of Jewish groups very upset, that talks about genocide and apartheid in Israel. And what one of our rabbis said was that he could have worded that section just as strongly without using those two very inflammatory words for certain people. For me, they're not inflammatory really, but I also have Israeli relatives, and for them, if I say genocide, they freak out. If I say apartheid, they freak out. So just know that those are two of the reasons why, or those two words are a big reason a lot of people are upset.
Thank you. That's a great idea about how to, dive into the platform. It is broad and deep and very detailed. It's broken down. It's got the major heading and kind of some examples, and then it gets more concrete, and then what you can do. So yeah, there's a lot in there. A lot to keep us busy. A lot. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Examples? Things that are coming up? That's anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we talked about this with another example earlier, but sometimes it's also starting simple. And I'll use myself as an example. My local White Allies UU group wanted to see how we could support our local Black Lives Matter group. So I made contact, I sent an email, and one of their leaders wanted to meet with me, and I had this picture. They're going to ask us to be in marches and call people and go do visits with representatives and all these things. And what they needed, because of where they were, was to use our coffee machine and have a place to meet sometimes. So, sometimes we don't know unless we ask what it is that's going to be really helpful.
And what I've been told over and over by friends I work with in the movement is, if they want to use your coffee pot and your kitchen and a meeting space, and you want to provide hospitality for them, do that and do that in an unobtrusive way and through the back door, and not to go and seek the cookies. Meaning, hey, look at us, white folks, we just brought you all food.
Exactly.
And also an important thing for us to do, I think, as UUs, which has been a historically and still remains demographically a dominantly white church, is to remember that we are not a white church. And that we are not, what can our congregation do to external groups that are Black, because that is not our church. And so decentralizing whiteness within our own congregations, I think, is a really important step, which is complex and hard. And can you speak to that, decentralizing? So that it's not we, the church, and when we say that, we mean the white people. So we, the church, want to help you, the Black people. How do we, the church, help you, the Black people? Black member of this church that we have just othered, and or you are our Black member. You will teach us everything about how to be allies to Black people, because as much as we frame ourselves as a white organization, as a white denomination, it becomes clear if you walk in the door who is welcome and who isn't as an actual member of the group. And so if a person of color walks in and is like, oh, we're so excited to have a person of color here because we don't have people of color here. It's like, no, thank you, goodbye. And so really figuring out how to live into and own and become all of this is complex, because we are a culture, again, that is historically white. We exist within the white supremacist culture of the world. And a lot of the things that we hold dear as Unitarian Universalists, I speak generally, often if you start looking at the how to dismantle white supremacy, we are holding up things that are also holding up white supremacy. So things like Robert's Rules of Order that we love as Unitarian Universalists in general is super white and super white supremacist. And so realizing that part of doing this work will also change the way that we look. Not just the color of the people in the room, but the way what we do looks and who we are and how things function. And so being able to sort of be okay with that.
And it's not just about things changing, but about our willingness to be changed.
Right, exactly. So that is a thing to just sort of, in this work, be really mindful of doing our best to not other, realizing that it will happen, that we will all screw up repeatedly, and not making a huge big deal about it, but also correcting, acknowledging, and moving forward with change, and humility. So being willing to say, like, I'm going to read this. Some of these things make me uncomfortable. How do I do this? And, like, if you read the whole platform, you don't need to just be like, well, I read the 6 bullet points. I'm going to call up the local Black Lives Matter chapter. Like, if you dig into them, they all say what groups are currently doing the work, what needs to be done, how do you do the work. So just, like, again, this document has been provided to you exhaustively. So as a congregation, what can we do? How can we do this? I love the idea of the read-in, but really sort of dig into this work and do this work and own it and make it part of who you are and part of your group, and not, we're doing this to help people who are not our congregation, but like, this is part of who we are. This is part of our DNA. This is part of what our congregation is and does and works for. It's a really important distinction. That's not, this is how we help them, but this is who we are and this is what we live into.
Right, a way of making it our praxis and bringing it into the culture of our church.
Right.
And as you discover what's in the platform and what opportunities are, either with other groups or what's happening in the community, just make that an ongoing thing.
And it's that whole as you live into it. So instead of saying, hello, Black people, come to us. We are so nice. We do so much good work. Look at all the good work that we do. Please come join our church. As opposed to just announcing that, if you are starting to do the work, if you are a congregation that is making that part of your DNA and is living into that and is doing the work, and you're showing up and you're being a part of it, you will be transformed. And people who you do the work with collectively will be like, oh, I found my people. And potentially will find Unitarian Universalism. So the way to really be a prophetic voice in this for our faith in this world is to live the work and not talk about how good you are at living the work, but to actually do the work. And the more we actually do the work, the more we will be transformed and changed, and the people who are engaged with us will be transformed and changed.
Hey, Carrie.
Hey, Lord.
You used a very interesting word, praxis, and I was wondering if you could either describe what that is and also possibly offer an example of how you can use it?
Sure. So I'll start with the spelling. So it's Praxis.
That's correct.
Thank you. Glad you checked me on that. So it's the idea that that the way we engage with something is a model of education. So learning about it. So learning about the platform, and then taking action on a piece of it. You know, getting together, contacting a Black Lives Matter group, or working on an issue with your police department or schools, and then coming back and reflecting on what you did, how it worked, how it fit, that kind of thing, and then building on that to do more education, more action, and so it becomes a way of being, a way of enacting and engaging with social justice.
Yeah.
That's good.
Where does that word come from?
It's Latin, I think. Oh, no.
So how might that look like in an action or in a program at your church?
What did you say, Lori? We were all talking.
So have you engaged in that kind of
Yes, we
circle?
engaged with it in Phoenix. That was the model for Justice GA, right? We did a lot of education because we like to do that. And we were going to do something we'd never done before, so we were a little afraid, so we did more education. We did lots of singing. Singing reflection, you know?
It's all the things.
It's all the things. You know, and we reflected upon our education. And then we did the action, we did the witness at 10 City. And we came back and we reflected on it. So that was a Praxis model.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That's next.
I had a thought, but it's gone.
Oh, no, I hate when that happens. You ready? How's the room? You still there? All right, they're still there. Anybody out there? Anything else? Now's your chance.
Catherine, go ahead.
Hey, Catherine.
Oh, I think she was waving goodbye.
Oh, So if you are looking for support, you know, if you're after the webinar, if you're thinking about this, you know, contact ARE through our website or Facebook page, and you know, you want to continue brainstorming or thinking about ways to do this work, or you know, you need to consult with us, please do reach out.
Angel Moore, do you want to say something?
Sure, I wasn't, I was fooling around trying to see how I could jump into the conversation. I think I figured it out. So I'm in Boston, and I'm active in the Brookline UU Church. And I was struck by something you said about decentering whiteness within our congregations, because we have various ways of supporting Black Lives Matter movement in the Boston area and the Brookline area. But I think it's harder to look at our own community and realize the ways we're doing things that are not welcoming and not inclusive of people from other cultures, mindsets, ways of being in the world. And so one of the things I've noticed is since we have a few people of color in our congregation, we actually have a fair number of children of color in our congregation, more than adults. But when the governing board or other committees or the congregation vote on things, we had been using a majority vote, you know, up or down, which creates winners and losers and is very alienating, I think, to people, and often means that voices of people of color get lost in those votes. So what we've tried more lately, and this was on the board, is it's a consent process. It's not like voting things up or down, but some people call it fist to five. So if an issue comes up and you're enthusiastic, you put up 5 fingers. And if you're pretty supportive, you put up 4. And if you're kind of neutral, but you can live with it, you put up 3. And if you have a concern, you put up 2. If you have a serious concern, you put up 1. And if you can't live with it, you block it. And so when you see visually where people are at with any particular decision, you can immediately see who has concerns, and then you can hear those concerns. And what we've done in a number of instances is try to reshape or modify the action that we were voting on to meet the concerns of the, 1 or 2 people that have serious concerns. And it's been a very enlightening way to change how we're doing business. And it reminded me of it when you said, get rid of Robert's Rules of Order, because there's a whole lot of things we use in our decision-making and governance process that I think, elevates very rigid Western colonial thinking. So anyway, that's just a thought.
That's great, Angel. Thanks for sharing that.
That really ties back into some of the stuff we were unlearning today about white supremacy culture. So it really ties together nicely. Carrie, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So some of the characteristics of white supremacy culture are, kind of binary thinking, right? You either vote yes or no. It's either stop or go. But this allows a much broader range of thinking about a topic, right? And different ways of processing, You might not be 100% for something. You might be okay about it, but if you have a concern, it gives you an opportunity to talk about it, and to move in a direction, where it's not the binary, it's not just one way or another way, but you might find a 3rd way or a 4th way or a 5th way by continuing that discussion, by allowing the time and respecting the relationships that you built, right, in this working group, that a board is a working group. To be able to talk through those things so you get to a point where you can agree. And I mean, don't you think you get a better decision in the end after investing that kind of time in a relationship and in that process?
And a decision where more people feel heard and represented, and therefore buy more into it.
Yes.
Like, it's not just like, oh, they made this decision like they always do, and like I don't matter, but just like even if the end conclusion is something you started out as like a 1 or a 5th with, having had that conversation and being heard and knowing that you're at the table and your voice matters makes a huge difference in sort of ownership in collective work.
Yeah, and increases the chances for success of whatever it is you're trying to do. Yeah, that's so true. As a mediator, I find so often that parties who, can barely look at each other, you know, once you just give them an opportunity to be heard, they are much more willing, right, to come to some kind of an agreement, to work something out. Right. You know, it's that deep human need to feel recognized, to feel heard, that so often white supremacy culture just shuts us down.
Which brings me back to something else we talked about here earlier today, and that's grounding this work in our faith, because our faith has to be about relationship. And what you all are talking about is building relationship, even as you're also getting at better ways of doing business. You know, let's remember that our churches and our UU faith is about faith. It's about spirituality, and what we're about, because we don't have creeds, is relationship. We're about covenants and the way that we are walking in the ways of beloved community with each other and our wider world. So this work is the work of our faith. We can't claim to covenant together to promote and affirm those 7 principles unless we're doing this work.
Amen.
Yep. That'll preach.
I'm also really curious, a follow-up question for Angel Moore. Like, how many people were in these kinds of consent decision-making? Was this like 50 people, 100 people?
Well, I know it's been used in several committees, which, you know, could be like 10 to 12 people. We used it a lot on the governing board for the last couple of years. We're still struggling in our last annual meeting of the congregation in May was the first time in a while that things were a little more contentious. And so we were really struggling with how to put this consent process into play with a large group, with, you know, maybe 100 people, and that was very challenging. And we were able to hear the concerns, but we weren't really able to get to consent, which, you know, felt pretty bad. But at least
that has to do. I'm guessing that has to do with the amount of time that was allotted for the meeting.
Right.
Right. So that was another prong of the white supremacy culture that we talked about today, this sense of urgency and sticking to a timetable. So it's encouraging that you guys, you know, tried to go there with the larger group. So yay, keep going. And I'd say that one of the things we learned about white supremacy culture as well is that it hurts all of us, not just people of color, and that your fist to 5 process can help, you know, more than just people of color. You know, people are marginalized on a lot of vectors in our churches. So that's really cool that you're going and trying that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd encourage you to go one step further, you know, and I mean, sometimes you gotta abandon the agenda, you know, in place of doing something better. That happened at General Assembly this year, right at the very end, when, you know, the moderator of our organization, you know, said, okay, you know, there's an emerging issue here that we, you know, just need to give over to Black Lives and UU. It's awesome.
Yeah, some of us had been to GA and had seen, you know, the need to suspend Robert's Rules of Order. So we knew up front that we would do that right at the beginning of the meeting so that we could have more flexibility.
On a large scale, the Continental UU Young Adult Network, where it existed, met with over 100 young adults using the consensus model. And the meeting did have to be longer, but they were able to use that model to make business decisions for the organization. So it is possible, and it helps when you have lots of practice. Like the whole community has practice in using it. So keep at it.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, sometimes you run into resistance. I mean, when I was a member at Live Oak here at UU in Austin, that was a church that was founded on consensus about 30 years ago now. Yeah, this is like its 30th anniversary, I think. Yeah. You know, the powers that be said, no, you can't run a church on consensus. You can't run it, you know, congregational life staff did not want a congregation using consensus. And they didn't totally give in, ultimately, which I'm proud of. But they said, you know, you just can't do this, and here's all the things wrong with it. And they have shifted a little bit,
Yeah.
but they haven't even ever completely, right?
Either or thinking again.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. It pops up everywhere, so you
Yeah.
kind of have to be on the lookout for it.
Yeah, and that raises a good point. There are also some ways of doing things that are somewhere between taking a vote and absolute consensus also. So
Anybody else? Anything else?
And just lifting up that the use of the democratic process is one of our oft ignored principles. So this is something that is sort of ingrained in this list of things that we sort of embrace as our credo, or as our creed, you know, different. So being mindful of that and of how things are really like inherent and ingrained in these sort of identities that are really important. And I know it's something I struggle with. And it's like, I love the intellectualism of Unitarian Universalism. This is one of the reasons I'm a Unitarian Universalist. Like that kind of stuff. So really like looking at those things and what we struggle with and what is our identity and what makes us and what is us buying into a system of domination and oppression.
Sounds like hard work. Right? Yeah, we can just fall back on the regular way of,
It's like we're faith community together trying to build a better world and be awesome humans.
Wow.
let's do that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if there's nothing else, I just want to thank everybody out there, everybody in here. It's been awesome. I think, and thanks especially to Lori, who, and Jim.
Thank you all. We had such a great meeting.
Yeah, and Jim, who's the interim minister here at Mount Diablo. Intern.
Yeah.
And Lori, who is our tech guru, because that's what she does for CLF, but she's also our treasurer on ARE. I'm not sure if you missed that. We plan to do more webinars. I don't know if we planned what to do on our webinars yet. We should probably update folks. So in addition to having this conference today, yesterday your ARE steering committee met with the wonderful facilitator, Ginny Von Corder, who helped us kind of revisit our mission and set us up for some great strategic planning. And I think, we're going to help build capacity in ARE. Anytime you have any questions or work you want to do, please reach out to us. We are here for you to help. And we know we've asked a lot if you're interested in volunteering, and a lot of you have. And we've been working on getting ourselves organized to on-ramp folks who are new. So thank you for your patience, and we apologize for, the worst thing you can do is ask for volunteers and then not get back to them. And I'm afraid we are guilty of that, but don't hope. It's not over yet. So we will be getting back to you on that. We've tweaked our mission a little bit, so look for that on our website and Facebook page, and future webinars to come. And we're looking forward to partnering more with Lauren. It's been awesome. Yay. And Chris, thanks so much. My fellow Texan.
That's right. Get you.
Texas. And he's just down the road, 200 miles. And to all the folks in the room, thanks. We spent a long day doing racial justice, so give us a woo-woo! Yeah. And with that, Lori, unless you want to sing us out.
Go now in peace. Go now.
Bye.
All right.
You all for showing up tonight.
All right.
All right, Dee. We did it. Awesome. Thanks, guys. That's not funny.